Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining me for another restful episode of true, scary stories to help you fall asleep. Today, we're going to be doing our monthly compilation of true scary stories, and I hope you enjoy them. So, without further ado, lay back, relax, and enjoy these true, scary stories. This is a story that happened to me when I was a child. I thought I'd share it on here. I've never shared this with anyone really before, so here we go. This took place back around 2008, if my memory serves me well. Me and my family had just moved to Costa Rica, and we enjoyed spending most of our time at the beach. One beach in particular, which was near a lovely little river I like to swim in. It was on this same beach that 9-year-old me found a dead body floating in the ocean. To give a little context, I had been playing on the beach, which we thought was a relatively safe beach, so my parents were further up. How wrong we were about it being safe. I remember seeing something floating in the water, but I wasn't sure what it was, so I went to investigate and found a dead man just floating there. Part of his leg had been hacked off. It was obvious that he had not drowned. The man had clearly been murdered. Around this time, we had heard about a recent string of murders that had happened both in the Caribbean side of Costa Rica, where we were, and on the Pacific side. The murders had been happening every 6 months, rotating in between regions of the country, so there was reason to assume this murder had been done by the same person, since it seemed to fit the timeline. As far as I can remember, the details of the murder were never disclosed in any of the local newspapers, only that the man had been a tourist from England, so there was no way for anyone who had not seen the man on the beach to know the specifics of his murder. Eventually, the whole thing blew over, and we returned to that same beach. I can't quite remember a time frame, but it was definitely within a few months of me finding the dead man that this next part happened. One day, I was swimming in the river with my mother when a very strange man popped up out of the water, startling us. He had a spear gun in his hand and a snorkel mask on. Anyways, he began talking to my mom, and I think we both could tell that something was just off about the guy. I wasn't really paying much attention for most of their conversation, but I do remember him bringing up the recent murder on the beach, and he seemed to know a great lot of details about it, which, as I previously mentioned, were not available to the public. It almost seemed as if he was trying to confess that he was the one who murdered the man, but without directly saying so. He also talked about how he traveled in between the Caribbean and the Pacific side of Costa Rica, spending half a year in each spot. Eventually, they also got on the topic of what he did for a living, and he went into a great detail about how he made the masks for the movie Eyes Wide Shut, and that he would make those masks, and I presume other ones based on real-life human emotions, and that he specifically liked capturing the look of fear. We were totally taken aback by this guy and didn't really know what to do. Eventually, he just got back into the river and swam away, and thankfully we never saw him again. I do not know if this is related or not, but the weird string of murders suddenly stopped after that. Sorry for the long post. Also, I tried to find the article about the man who was murdered so I could link it, but I couldn't seem to find any info on it. Hello, everyone. First of all, I'm not a native English speaker, so please be indulgent with me. I'll try my best to make as little mistakes as possible. Also, long-time lurker, first-time poster. Anyway, my story deals with a pretty common situation that happens a lot, but it still creeped me out. Every year for summer holiday, me and my family go to my grandparents' house in a region in France called Bretagne, and they have the luck to live on a cliff right next to the beach, which is pretty neat. And for you to understand the situation I was in, I'll do a quick description of the place and most importantly how to access the beach. If it's not clear enough, I'll try to get some pictures as soon as possible as I'm here again. When we get out of the house, we need to cross a little road and get to an entrance between bushes. Then it's a clear but narrow path that you can take just to enjoy the view of the sea, or you can also go to a staircase built in the rock off the cliff. Then you'll just have to walk on medium-sized stones, and you've arrived at the beach. The place itself is pretty big, but there's only a few ways to access it, by the staircase I described, or by another one at the other end of it. Also, big thing to mention, as I grew older, I stopped building sandcastles and swimming with my family. I'm 18, and the older of the 3 siblings are way younger than me, so I was done playing child's games. And I had started to climb the cliffs for fun. Not the steep ones. It was more or so a semi-hiking of partially collapsing cliffs. This will be relevant later. Now, on to the story. Last year after having dinner, I headed out for a little walk on the beach. No one seemed determined to come with me, so I went alone. No big deal. I did it every evening. After going down the staircase, I walked a little bit and then sat down on a stone to smoke a joint and listen to some music. Not really smart, but hey, I'm a teen in a little village that I go to every summer, and as much as I love my family, it gets pretty boring from time to time. Anyway, I'm enjoying my time when I spot a big guy in the corner of my eye at maybe 40 meters of me. No big deal, it's a free access beach after all. But then he starts heading his way towards me. His head was shaved, and he had square-shaped glasses on, maybe around his mid-20s or early 30s. He was pretty tan, like he worked outside for a long time. The bald dude is getting closer, but again, I don't own the beach. As he's coming next to me, I hear over my music that he's trying to talk to me. I remove my headphones and he said something along the lines of, "Hey, you look familiar. Have we met before?" I answered with a calm but firm no, but he keeps insisting that he saw me at the beach today. And sure, I said maybe he did, but there are tons of people at the beach. I don't remember everyone I see. The way I'm responding clearly implies that I'm not interested in having a conversation with him, but he sits on a stone next to me and keeps talking mostly about himself, that he loves the beach, the weather is nice, that I'm nice with him. This is where it got creepy. He says that it's rare to find nice girls, and that he's happy that I'm not a B-word. He then asks about my name, where I live, and of course I didn't say a thing. He started to lean closer to me, which made me really uncomfortable, always with a huge grin on his face. That's when it hit me. Remember when I said that there were only a few entrances to the beach? That jerk was sitting right between me and the staircase. I was cornered. No one was there. We were completely alone. And even though I'm quite athletic, I'm 5.9 feet and weigh 90 pounds. This guy for me is twice my size, and he clearly wants to continue our discussion. As I'm not responding, he started to sound annoyed, clenching his fist. But still, with his stupid grin glued to his face, he asked me if I was really a good girl, and why won't I talk to him? I'm crapping myself at this point, when I look at my left and almost let out a sigh of relief. One of the cliffs that I'm used to climbing onto is right next to us, and even if I said that they are more like hiking than climbing, I could rush to the top in a matter of seconds as I'm used to doing it, run on the narrow path and get home safe. So I just got up and said, "I don't want to talk anymore. Good evening." He looked startled for a moment, looking back at the staircase for a second, which confirmed my suspicions. He thought he had blocked my only way of escaping, since the other stairs were way too far. To this day, it still scares me that this was his first reaction. At this point, I'm high, tired and terrified, but I start to walk confidently to the cliff at a high pace, and in the corner of my eye, I can see that he is standing now looking in my direction. As soon as I'm close enough, I literally start to jump from rock to rock as fast as I can, scratching myself in the process. When I arrive at the top, I look down, and he is looking at me, not smiling like before, but frowning and looking like he is on the verge of committing a crime. I then sprinted to my grandparents' house, which luckily is really close, and explained everything to my mother. And the next day, I reported the guy to the police station, giving the best description that I could. Since it's a small village, they could apprehend him easily if he was a resident. But to be fair, French police suck, and nothing came of it. So yeah, sorry if it was long, but I wanted to give a detailed explanation of what happened. It was a little bit anticlimactic, but this guy actually had a plan in mind, and I'm glad that I did not stick around to discover what it was. And again, since I'm back at the place, I could take some pictures of it if you'd like. Just ask. So when I was a kid, maybe 6 or 7 in the mid-90s, we took a family trip to the beach in Florida. We were staying in a beach house a short walking distance from the beach. We went to the beach and I was supposed to stay inside of my mom, but I wandered way down, and before I knew it, I was lost. A lot of the houses looked the same, and I wasn't sure which one was ours. Plus, I couldn't see my mom anywhere. It started to rain. I came to a path that I was pretty sure led back to our house. Only, it didn't lead to a house at all, but instead to a parking lot. There was a big dirty van parked there. It was the only vehicle around. I was about to turn back when I noticed an overweight woman with brown hair, a hot pink tank top, and those big clunky thick glasses that were popular in the 80s, waving and smiling at me from the passenger seat of a van. She said something like, "Oh my, it's raining. Where's your mom? Let us take you to her. It's dangerous to be out here in the rain. You could get struck by lightning." She was very friendly, almost overly so. In the driver's seat was a very overweight man without a shirt on, a hairy gray chest, and some clunky-looking gold chain. He was wearing yellow-tinted Elvis shades and staring at me intently. He was also smoking a cigarette, which I knew was bad. The woman stepped out of the van and kneeled down to me. She asked how old I was. When I told her, she gleefully remarked, "Oh my, we have 2 boys at our house your age. You should come over and spend the night. We've got movies, Nintendo, and in the morning we've got all types of cereal." I had been taught all about stranger danger, but at this point in my life, no adult had ever given me any reason not to trust them. The lady continued talking about stuff like how the boys have go-karts and they like to drink chocolate milk. She made it seem very enticing for a 7-year-old kid, and at this point, I trusted her. I mostly liked the idea of getting to play with some kids my age. Then I remembered that I needed to ask my mom first. I told her this. She told me that was no problem, that they lived just up the road, and my mom shouldn't mind. It started raining harder, and she opened the sliding door of the van and said something like, "Now let's get you out of this rain and go find your mommy." I knew logically that I shouldn't do this, but the lady seemed really nice, and I was desperately wanting to get out of the rain. As I walked towards the open door of the van, I noticed an awful stench that almost made me gag. This set off alarm bells in my head that something wasn't right. There were cigarette butts all over the floor. I looked up at the fat man who was not only staring at me with this menacing glare, but he had this real creepy toothy smile, and his teeth were stained a dark yellow. I could pick up on a very messed up vibe from him. I knew now that I should run, but the woman was ushering me to hurry up and get in. Her demeanor had changed. She was being demanding and trying to literally push me into the van. She sounded angry and said, "Get in already," in a tone that was the complete opposite of how she had sounded before. I jumped to the side and started running as fast as I could. The woman managed to grab my arm or wrist, but somehow I was able to quickly break free and run back to the beach. I think she tried to chase me, but like I said, she was very overweight. I made it back to my mom, who was freaking out. I tried explaining what had happened to me, but I didn't think that at 7 years old I was able to convey the gravity of what had happened to me, and I didn't fully understand it myself. This happened years ago, when I was maybe 17. I'm 23 now. My family was on vacation. We were staying at a resort in South Carolina on the beach. The resort had 2 buildings, one directly by the beach and one across the street. We were staying in the building across the street. My cousin, my sister, and myself decided to go and sit on the beach one night. It was probably about 9 p.m. There were usually a few people out walking or playing around. On this night, there wasn't anyone out there except a few couples walking by randomly. We sat down some towels and watched the water from a good distance. We were chatting and telling stories. We noticed a man walking around us, going to the water, back to the walkway leading up to the resorts, back and forth. He got closer and closer to us until he was walking so close that he stepped on the edge of our towels. He was a big man with shaggy blonde hair. My sister suggested we go down to the water. He followed us. At this point, we knew he was following us, so we decided to leave. We started up the wooden walkway back to our building. Like I said, our building was across the street. To get to it, you had to pass through a little alleyway. The alley was well lit, and the street was relatively busy, but there was a parking garage adjacent to the alleyway. My head immediately told me not to walk past that parking garage. We were facing the alleyway, about to walk through. This guy is right behind us. I loudly said, "Hey, wait, let me beat off my sandals." We stopped and took our shoes off and beat the sand out of them. The man passed us reluctantly, so close that he was almost touching us. I saw his eyes for the first time. He was definitely on something. His pupils were messed up. His eyes were wide as saucers. He passed by us slowly and went where? Directly into the parking garage. I knew he was waiting for us. I said, "Run." We ran back over the wooden walkway and onto the beach, through the sand to the next walkway, which led up to another building's pool area. He was behind us again, chasing us, running full force. We got into the pool area and the man stopped. There was a woman cleaning, and we told her what happened. She got hotel security, and a police officer asked us some questions and walked us back to our building. I was scared by this experience for a while, and I will not go to the beach at night ever again. At least, not without my very large and tough fiancé by my side. Ever. I was a single mother of 2 young boys. We didn't have a lot of money, so we would often drive down to a small state park along the Oregon Coast Highway. We would park the car and walk a trail through the woods to the beach. We usually had the whole beach and trail to ourselves, with the exception of the occasional surfer. This was almost the case the last time we were there. It was a Wednesday. We had a good time talking about the trees, berries, and even posing for a few pictures. We rolled up our pant legs and explored the tide pools. It was fun, but we were tired and ready to go home. On the way back, a man came running towards us from the other trail. When he stopped, his face was about a foot away from mine. I hadn't seen him as he first approached, therefore didn't have time to realize that I should be scared. I smiled at him and said, "Excuse me." As I started walking, it dawned on me. He should have seen us long before he came up on us. He wasn't dressed for a jog either. I started to think of what I would do if he came after us. There was no way to outrun him with my 2 little ones. My kids were talking to me, but I was so scared I couldn't think to answer. So I decided to sing a little song from their Yoshi video game. "Be careful, be careful." Over and over, singing faster and faster, trying to make them walk faster. Finally, we returned to the car. I lifted them into the passenger seat through the driver's side. We didn't even need to have seat belts or a change of clothes. We just had to leave, now. The following Wednesday, I received a phone call from my mom. 2 workers had been shot in the head at that park. One lived. The other I knew had not. It turns out that the man had been released from prison 2 weeks before. He had stole their pickup. When he was caught, he claimed that he didn't shoot them. He described another vehicle that he claimed was there, and it was the perfect description of my car. So I had just graduated from high school in June, and about 2 weeks later, some friends and I decided to go camp out on the beach and have a bonfire and whatnot. There was a ton of other people there too, so we weren't too worried about something happening. A lot of them were still awake at their campsites well into the night, and at this age, no bonfire is complete without lots and lots of pot. So there's 4 of us and we're hotboxing the tent. We're really turned up, and we're just munching away on whatever we had while talking and listening to music outside by the fire. 1 a.m. rolls around and my mom calls me because she suddenly changed her mind and wanted me home. But I was so high that I wasn't capable of leaving just yet. So I waited an hour and we hop into my buddy's truck and tear up the beach on the 10-minute drive back to the parking lot where I had left my car. We get there. I give everyone a hug goodbye, and they tell me to drive safe or just bite the bullet and stay with them so I'm safe. I tell them that I'll just nap in my car for a bit so I can come down before driving. They leave, and I'm sitting in my car for about 15 minutes, but I just started getting creeped out. There was no one out in the entire city but me, and it was just so dark and eerie. It was unsettling to say the least, so I thought, screw this, I'm getting out of here, at least to a well-lit place. I turned on my car and backed out, then started to leave the lot when I noticed a pair of headlights come on the other end of the lot. Crap, it must be the popo. Nope. I come to a stoplight and look in my mirror. It was a black sedan. Okay, no big deal. Maybe they just happened to leave the same time I did. They took the same turns I was taking. I almost went through the back roads back to my town, but decided the freeway would be safer. As soon as I was on the on-ramp, I stomped the gas pedal and was pushing 95. They kept up. I tried switching lanes and falling back so I was behind them, but they did the same, so I just sped up again. They followed me for the 20-minute drive back to my hometown. I made a bunch of turns and was finally able to lose them by quickly turning in a narrow road, hiding my car behind some trees and shutting it off. I rolled down the window just a bit and watched as they stopped in the street I turned from and got out of the car and looked around cluelessly. It was 2 guys that had to be in their 40s. My heart was racing so badly, and I was praying that they wouldn't spot me. They got back in and drove off. I waited 10 minutes before getting back on the road. I made it home safe and locked the door and window when I got inside. Needless to say, I didn't sleep that night, and I stared out my window all night in case they found me. First-time poster, long-time lurker here. This memory was brought up at Sunday lunch last Sunday, so I decided to post it here. Okay, a bit of a backstory here. I'm 19 now, but I was around 4 or 5 at the time. My parents used to be nudists when I was small, and would encourage me and my brother, 7 or 8 at the time, to accept our bodies, not to be afraid to show the skin that we were born in. Other child teaching stuff like that. They informed me that a lot of their reason for being nudists was because of a very manipulative and persuasive friend they used to have, who was into the practice. They are now extremely embarrassed about their period as nudists, and try to hide the matter from a lot of friends and family. Well, anyway, my dad and mom both worked a pretty stable job in an online accounting firm back then, so we went on holidays quite often. I used to love going to Spain the most, so we chose to go to Spain that summer. On our 10-day trip there, before we headed off to the US for a weekend, we enjoyed going to the beach almost every day. Of course, at the time, my parents loved nudist beaches, not only for people like them, but also to get a perfect lineless tan. So we were on the beach, and my dad and brother were splashing around on the shore while my mother and I were on some sun chairs. her sleeping and me burying my legs in some sand. I didn't really have anything growing on me back then, so nobody paid much attention to me. They did like to look at my mother occasionally though, and when I told her we moved our chairs back to a more secluded part of the beach, where there were less people, she fell back asleep, and next to us were a couple, with 2 kids playing behind their chairs, which I thought were their kids. The woman looked at me as I reburied my little legs in the sand and pointed at me, whispering something to the man. She stood up and hung a towel from the sun umbrella above them. He reached into a duffel bag next to him and got out some sunscreen and started to rub it on a sausage-like thing between his legs vigorously. I now know what that was. He was staring intently at me, and even 14 years later I remember that odd look of determination but pleasure on his face. He passed the sunscreen to his girlfriend/wife, and she slipped some in between her legs as well. Even at that age, and with my parents being nudists, I felt an instinct that it was not right for them to be staring at me and touching themselves like that. I tried to ignore them and look away, but when I looked back, they were still staring at me. The woman's look was a little softer than the man's, but still really thoroughly creeped me out. What happened next is one of the creepiest things that has ever happened to me, and that is saying a lot compared to other things that have happened to me. The next minute, the woman stopped touching herself and got up. She wiped her hands and area and reached for me, grabbing my arms and shushing me, trying to pull me out of the sand that I was buried in. The sand was giving away quickly, and I screamed for my mother. She says I kept going, "Mommy, help. Mommy, help." But I don't remember. It was all a blur to me as my mom got up and yelled, "¿Qué está haciendo?" "What are you doing?" at the woman. My mom said the woman quickly let go of me, and not in Spanish, but in a northern English accent, which she must have guessed because the English tinge in my mother's Spanish, explained to her that I had buried myself deep in the sand up to my nose, and she thought that I was going to slip under, so she had simply pulled me out of concern. The sand underneath me was wet, and from my hips upwards I had not a spot of sand stuck to me whatsoever, so my mom knew she was lying. "Your daughter is very pretty and we meant no harm," the man said, unaware that he was still rubbing his nether regions. At that point, my mother loses it. "What did you just say? And what are you doing to yourself, you disgusting old twit?" The man realized and removed his hand from his inner thigh. "Just sun cream. Keep the old sun from burning me. Just rubbing it in. Do you like hip-hop?" is what I said. My mother reminded him his wife had draped a towel that was blocking all sun, and he blushed profusely. She spat in the young woman's face, got my hand, and dragged me away quickly. We got to my brother and dad, and she told my dad what had happened. He stormed over to the lifeguard and explained to him very shortly the situation. Then him and the lifeguard went to where our stuff was. The couple had taken off, and all that was left were their seats and the 2 kids. Mom scoured through her beach bag for her cell to call the local police station, but her phone was missing. So was my dad's wallet. The lifeguard radioed into the beach kiosk to call the police and to play on the speakers placed on the bars around that 2 kids were unaccompanied and their parents need to collect them. In about a minute or so, a woman came running, tears in her eyes, and scooped up the 2 kids. They must have been around 2 years old, and she held them, crying her eyes out. She thanked the lifeguard and my parents and told us that her husband had fallen asleep, and we told her the couple must have taken them and moved them to their spot. She had her cell in hand and said she was just about to call the police. My mom told her to, and the lifeguard offered to drive us all to the station, including the woman and her husband, as his shift was about to end. We all changed and drove down. In the end, my parents and the nice couple gave their statements. 2 days later, that couple was caught in a hotel, offering kids around a pool sprites that had apparently been drugged. They admitted to being child fetishists, a more complicated word for nasty P words, and were arrested for many charges like child abduction. They were found with a kid in their hotel room, attempting to kidnap, child molestation, trespassing, amongst others. My dad says they were deported back to somewhere near Bradford, but ran away before court was due. I don't know if they're still out there, but creepy, vile couple who hurt kids and upset my childhood, let's never, ever meet again. I worked with my girlfriend at a busy restaurant. We worked all the time and it was a stressful job. We took off a few days and decided to fly somewhere to get away from work, people, and the town in general. I found decent deals and flights to Ocean City, Maryland for 2 nights. She had never been on a plane. We loved the beach, and I could hit up all the local crab cake spots. It was perfect. We flew into Baltimore and rented a car to drive to OC. Nothing memorable happened the first day. We laid on the beach, hit up all the local shops, and had forgettable food. The second full day we woke up and went to the most recommended stop for crab cakes. And on the way back we stopped and got crab cakes to go from 2 other recommended places for later. We stopped by the hotel to drop the food off and went to the hotel bar for a few drinks. Note, my girlfriend at the time was a smoker and I hated it. She would also attract attention from guys, which I would deal with but wasn't thrilled about. We go to the rooftop bar at the hotel, and the bar itself is a 4-sided island in the middle of the patio. It's probably 2 p.m. and a clear sunny day. We pull up chairs, and there's only a few women on the left side of the bar, and a guy bartender behind it. We got obligatory house margaritas. After her first drink, my girlfriend felt like she wanted a smoke, but the girls and the bartender didn't have one to bum her. We got refills and schmoozed with the bartender about the area and things to do, but mainly kept to ourselves. The bartender seemed as if he was being fake. Something was off and I couldn't put my finger on it. A feeling of, I really don't want to run into the restroom and leave her there at the bar, because I don't trust something. More than a few times he asked us if we were staying at that hotel. I think I said no. The girlfriend said yes. She asked us what room at one point. My girlfriend went to use the restroom. A minute later, I heard guys' voices. I didn't realize there was a group of 3 to 4 guys that sat at a table directly behind us. They were either playing cards or just smoking, but they made some comment to her when she walked back. Great. We finished our drinks and were Googling tropical drinks for her and area hotspots to check out. The guys came up on either side of us and talked to the bartender and got beers. You could tell they were either friends or regulars. I honestly couldn't tell you if they were there when we came to the bar or if they came after, but they had a sleazy vibe. Me and my girlfriend ended up talking to the only other couple at the bar that had come and sat down. It was nice to be away and just relax. We always liked making new friends. I didn't realize it, but one of the guys came up and either brushed against my girl or made a comment, and it rubbed me the wrong way. So, in her infinite wisdom, she wanted to be bothersome to them and got up and asked to bum a smoke. I didn't realize it until I turned around and there she was, talking to the guy with his shirt unbuttoned and gold chains hanging on his chest hair forest. I didn't want her associating with them, but if one gave her a smoke, I would get the guy a beer if it meant we didn't have to leave the bar to hit a store for smokes. She came back without a cigarette, mad. Apparently, the guys kept asking what's in it for us, and said, "Your boyfriend wants to fight us. Why would we give you anything?" I didn't want to fight them. I was on vacation and I wasn't paying attention to them. But I didn't like the implication of the other comment, at all. Because we had a lackluster first day, I wanted to pack in fun things this day, so this drink was my last one. I asked for the tab, and the guy of the couple we met gave us his business card. He said we should meet him and his girlfriend at Secrets at 8 p.m. The guys behind us kind of swarmed on all sides of us and slammed down a pack of cigarettes. 2 smokes inside left, in between both me and the girlfriend. They said something like "here" when they ordered another round. We found it odd, but I thanked them and offered a shot. I don't even think they replied. One asked if we were vacationing, then asked if we were staying at this hotel, then took the round of beers back to the table. I had a weird feeling, as if they were locals and didn't like us because we were visitors. Turning back to the bar, my drink was now completely full. Stupid me didn't even question it. I didn't want a refill, but figured the bartender topped me off. I took a sip and the drink was strong. I just closed out, so maybe it was a thank you for the tip. It was disgustingly strong, like rubbing alcohol, maybe even turpentine. I told my girl to try it. Boozy Susie over here takes a huge pull from my drink and nearly spit it back out. It was gross. She made a face and said that it shouldn't taste like that. I couldn't even ask the bartender about it because he was gone. I don't know when he disappeared, but he was nowhere to be found. I can't remember if I fully finished the nasty thing or not. My girl said something along the lines of, "The guys are staring, let's go." I was originally worried that she was going to chat them up and thank them before we left, but she said she felt weird. The whole vibe changed. She wanted out. I remember spending a minute or two saying bye to the couple that we were going to meet later and heading towards the doors into the hotel. The guys weren't at their table. Patio door, elevator, hotel room door, bed. My eyes open and I turn my head right. The alarm clock reads 3 a.m. I am face down in bed, on top of the covers. I push myself up, slide back off the bed and stand up. The sliding glass doors are wide open, as are the screen doors to the balcony. There's a breeze. I think, did my girlfriend jump off the balcony? And in that millisecond I hear crying behind me. My girlfriend is sitting Indian style on the floor, with a clamshell of what was $40 worth of crab cakes in her lap, crying. She said she couldn't wake me up. She asked me if I remembered what happened. She said she had been sick and throwing up for 4 hours nonstop. What the heck happened? I bent over to sit down with her and got hit with a wave of sickness. I ran and was in that bathroom for hours puking. By the time I came out, she was asleep/passed out again. This had to be a bad dream. I remember thinking that maybe we went to the club and got wasted and I blacked out. I went back to bed. We both woke up at 7 a.m. to our alarms. We had to take the rental to Baltimore and catch a flight back. We both had to be at work at 2 today. I was shaking. She looked like heck. We both felt like death. She was shook. She said the walk back to the hotel room was scary, and she didn't remember anything after. Wait, what? According to her, when we walked into the hotel room from the bar patio, one of the guys was on a chair near the elevators. He said something to us, but the doors closed quickly. She said when we got to our floor, 2 of the guys were at the end of the hall heading towards us. She said that he got in the room, and they stood outside the door, and she thinks they knocked. Apparently, I laid on the bed and immediately was lights out. She couldn't wake me, and passed out herself until she woke up to violently vomit for hours. My body was shot. I was shaking, and now I'm processing that these scumbags maybe followed us to our room. Part of me thought she was exaggerating, but you know how you have a weird slow motion flashback? Well, as I was graying out on the way to the hotel room, I remember one of the guys being by the elevator. Also, as she was brushing her teeth, her mouth was blue. I went to the mirror. So was mine. Neon blue. Nothing we had that day was blue. I had light green margaritas and vodka root beers. This was proof that something fishy had to have happened. We didn't know what to do. We had to get back. We couldn't stick around. We got to the car. I barely felt okay to drive, but I wanted to be home. We felt dirty. We were confused, and we wanted out of Maryland and swore we were never coming back. We missed our flight, explained the situation to the desk, and somehow got put on another flight back home. We sat in the airport for hours, dying. The flight was painful too. We made it to work a few hours late that day. Nobody believed our story and thought we made it up to justify being late, and we kind of just never brought it up again. I Googled to see if similar situations happened and found nothing. We Googled blue tongue and saw that it's a side effect of a drug. I'll be honest, I felt lucky we made it out of Ocean City. I don't know if we were a target of a room invasion or robbery, or if they wanted to attack or kidnap my girl. It could have turned out ugly in a lot of different ways. What if my girlfriend didn't take a huge swig? What if I drank the whole thing by myself? How close did I come to an OD or death depending on the drug and its interactions with alcohol? I swear the bartender was in on it. I did call the hotel and I asked if there was any issues with people being drugged or room robberies, and they said that they had 0 incidents, and I think I let it go. I emailed the hotel from a throwaway email that I created and told them to watch the hotel roof bar and bartender, and never got a reply. I realize I wrote a ton, but that's my story, and I think about it anytime someone brings up Ocean City. So, I don't know if you will all view this as an overreaction on my part, but this really shook me up. Let me know what you think. Between August 2012 and June 2013, when I was 20 years old, my boyfriend Ryan was living abroad in Trieste, Italy as a teacher. We're both from New England, and I was unfortunately stuck at home for my junior year of college. 10 months is a long time to be in a long-distance relationship. So for Christmas, my parents told me I could go visit Ryan over his February holiday, which fell on his birthday and Valentine's Day. In short, it was perfect. When the time came, I sat at the airport, said a quick goodbye and happy birthday to Ryan via text, as I knew that I wouldn't have service on the flight, or at all in Europe. He wasn't able to meet me at the airport because of work, so he texted me directions about what to do when I land in Trieste. The directions went something like this. When you land, go out to the buses, get on the C bus and take it for about 45 minutes. At the end, you'll be at a train station, and I'll meet you there. It wouldn't hurt to get a map or ask someone from directions if they speak English, but if you follow my directions, you should have no problem. This all seemed pretty straightforward to me, but as I was sitting on the bus, I couldn't help but feel I had done something wrong. You know how it is. When you're helpless, you always assume the worst. And I was pretty helpless in a foreign country, with little knowledge of the language and no traveling companion. So naturally, I was worried. I decided to try to communicate with the woman next to me, just to calm my nerves. Scusi, Inglés? Parle Inglés? She made a face and held up her fingers to show she spoke a little English. Oh, grazie. I'm looking for the train station. Stazione Treno? Dove? I pulled out the map I got at the airport and pointed to the train station on the map. She smiled immediately. Si, vengo con me, which I'm pretty sure means come with me. And even if it doesn't, she seemed to know where I wanted to go. And after viewing the map, how could she not? About 15 to 20 minutes into the ride, the bus stops in a really sketchy looking part of the city. The woman stood up and made a come here gesture with her hands. I looked around at the buildings outside and didn't see a train station anywhere. Ryan had been adamant that I wouldn't miss it, and I had only been on the train for half the time that he said I would be. Alarm bells started going off in my head. This woman was being so insistent, yet she knew exactly where I wanted to go because I had shown her the map and clearly this wasn't it. Then she grabbed my arm and tried to pull me out of my seat. I was not having any of this. I said no grazie, ciao, and waved goodbye. She looked really irritated, but she seemed to give up. I heard her mutter something I couldn't understand in Italian, and that's when 5 dudes stood up from all different parts of the bus and got off with her. The 6 of them were clearly together, yet she had sat next to me and had not talked once to any of them over the course of the 20-minute bus ride. I was more than a little creeped out, but I made it to my stop without any further incident about a half an hour later. I mentioned my experience to Ryan, and the two of us laughed it off jokingly that I could have ended up like the girl in Taken. I'm pretty sure I was just overreacting, but sometimes I really wonder. Italy, Trieste in particular, is known for human trafficking. A huge ring was just busted in May of this year. I feel like lonely, young foreign travelers are probably the easiest prey for them. And luring a young girl in with a woman and then using men to strong-arm her just doesn't seem so far out of the realm of possibility. Bad people or not, it was pretty scary for me, and I'm glad that I had enough sense to stay on the bus. Who knows where I'd be now? Hi guys, I'm a 20-year-old female, and this took place back in March. I was 19 years old at the time. It was the end of spring break and I was returning to Texas from California. I had just spent my vacation with my sister who lives in San Francisco. Every college kid counts down the days until spring break, and my vacation had gone rather well. However, I was slightly okay with returning to the essays and research papers, because I miss my friends, my bed, and my cat. Maybe not in that particular order. I was flying alone, something I don't like doing for multiple reasons, and I had only one layover in Dallas. I don't like traveling alone because I've had some bad experiences, and I happen to look a lot younger than 20. Most often, people say I look 13 or 14 at the most. I've always hated this about myself, but I'm told I'll be grateful when I'm older. As of now, it's just immensely frustrating. The last time I was on a plane by myself, the attendant thought that I was an unaccompanied minor named Taylor. I quickly assured her that I was not the minor in question. The time before that, I was asked to move away from the emergency exit, because you have to be at least 16 to sit there. Anyways, my boyfriend was picking me up from the airport and I was excited. I wore the pink members-only jacket he had bought for me and tried to look my best, which is difficult to do when traveling. When the plane arrived in Dallas, we had some really terrible weather and the turbulence was scary, but no matter. Soon I would be on another flight to Houston. I took the train around to the C terminal and made my way to the gate, only to find that due to torrential rain and lightning, my flight had been canceled. I was crushed, but determined, so I took my ticket to the exchange for a flight later. It seemed many others had the same grievance and were opting to do the same. As I was standing in line, a friendly-looking older man came up to stand behind me. "Are you alone?" he asked me. Everyone seemed to be conversing with one another, complaining about the weather and pondering about their options to get home. It didn't seem like a big deal, because strangers always seem to connect in situations like this one. We were all frustrated. I also felt safe in the crowded airport, so I answered him truthfully and continued to wait in line. The man behind the counter said I was in luck, that there were only 2 seats left on another flight to Houston, and that I could make it if I hurried. I rushed to board the train to the A terminal to catch my new flight, and upon reaching the gate was faced with the same situation. This new flight was canceled too. The man from before had followed me to the gate and was in the same boat. I exchanged my ticket for a later flight, and resolutely marched myself to the new gate only to be told the same as before. This happened literally 2 or 3 more times, because I didn't want to give up and really had no other options. The man shadowed me during the entire ordeal, and I didn't really find it strange. We were just 2 individuals stranded in an airport. The last gate I went to, I noticed he was still following me. He walks over to me and begins to chat about the awful luck we are having. Someone eavesdropping nearby suggests that I rent a car. I politely tell them that I'm not old enough. The man smiles and says to me, "Well, I'm old enough to rent a car. How about this? I'll rent us one. You can sleep and I'll drive." I look at him, and the way he is staring at me scares me. I finally begin to feel that something is off. I respond, no, but thank you. I'm going pretty far." His smile falters me for a moment. Then he suggests that he buy me some food. I'm starving. I am tempted. I hesitate for a moment, but then I remember a book I had read about a girl who was stolen from the airport after a man drugs her coffee. This gives me the strength to deny my grumbling stomach and decline him again. He follows me. I don't know why. He's already told me he is going to rent a car and leave. He points to a Mexican restaurant and says, "Oh, how about this place?" He has this strange look on his face and is standing far too close to me. I shake my head and say, "I told you, I'm really not hungry." Lie. Big lie. I can smell something delicious and I almost give in. But my face does not betray my hunger, and I keep my pace. Okay, what about burgers then? He looks a bit annoyed. This guy does not give up easily. I ignore him. This causes him to glare at me angrily and then stalk away. I breathe a sigh of relief. I call my sister to tell her about him, not in a catty sort of way, just a wow, that guy was persistent kind of thing. I settle into a chair to think about my options. I feel pretty alone and worried. My latest ticket has me leaving around midnight, and it was about 9 p.m. at that point. I had been in the airport since 5 p.m. If this last flight didn't work out, I had no clue what I would do. I had no money for a hotel, and didn't fancy sleeping in a chair. The last time I fell asleep in public, on a train in France, a lady attempted to steal my backpack, but that's another story. I look up about 30 minutes later to see the same man walking towards me. I tuck my legs up in my chair nervously and pretend to play on my phone. "Hey there, still here?" he asks. He seems to have cooled down. I just stare at him. He clears his throat and tries again. "So I was thinking, you should come stay at my aunt's house with me for the night. That's where I'm staying tonight. It'd be no problem. You don't want to be in this airport all night all alone." I shake my head and say no, I'm fine, then turn my attention back to my phone. I didn't even make eye contact. I felt really uncomfortable. He tries to convince me and I have to say no firmly several more times. He looks angry. Really angry. His hands are clenched and his smile is obviously fake. It looks as if he will shatter his teeth if he clenches his jaw any tighter. I wonder myself, why hasn't he left the airport yet? Then I notice that his luggage is no longer with him. He was rolling it behind him and now he isn't. Where would he have put it if he hadn't left yet? And so much time has passed. Why is he back here? As I'm thinking all of this, he is just standing there, staring. After what feels like forever, he storms off again. I feel so anxious because of him that I grab my things and move to a different gate to wait. My phone was dying, and I didn't want to be without it. So to charge it, I had to plug it into the outlet in the floor. I curled up in the aisle between the chairs to wait. My sister called me about an hour later, and I was talking to her and telling her how creepy the dark weather outside looked. When I see him, again, walking around, glancing here and there in search of me. I hunched down even further, but my pink jacket was like a beacon. He locked eyes with me and I looked down. My sister said to stay on the phone, so I did. "Well, there you are," he says, not even acknowledging that I'm in the middle of a phone call. I continue talking to my sister when it becomes apparent that he isn't leaving, and doesn't care that I'm on the phone. I finally look up. "So you're still here? Look, you need to come with me. You can stay with me at my grandparents' tonight. They would love to have you. They won't mind me bringing you at all. Just come with me." I got chills. I don't know why, but something in his eyes told me that he was lying through those shiny white teeth of his. "You said you were staying with your aunt." His face dropped. It went from cool and collected to something else. Not even anger this time, and not defeat either. Almost like amusement. Something like the cat that ate the canary. He shrugs his shoulders like, "I tried." But we both recognize that he was caught in his lie. The entire time, my sister is saying hello repeatedly, but I was sort of shocked by how indifferent he was to catching me on him. I go back to my conversation and he says, "If you change your mind," and lets the final thought trail off while walking away backwards, eyes still on me. I call my boyfriend and tell him about each exchange, and he tells me to find a security guard to tell. I look around for one but couldn't find one. It was creepy because I've never seen an airport so deserted. I end up just deciding to move again and lay down between two different aisles out of view. A boy my age walks by and asks, "Why are you laying on the floor?" And I respond a tad aggressively with "because I want to." He laughs and puts his hands up, the unspoken sign for "whoa, take it easy." I apologize for my gruffness and tell him that a man was making me nervous. He jokingly says he'll protect me. and because he seems harmless and I mention my boyfriend, I converse with him for a while. He tells me he saw me and wondered why that blonde girl looked so sad. A while later, I'm thankful I did not brush this stranger off, because I see the man again walking around. We made eye contact, but he did not attempt to approach me because I was no longer alone. Maybe he was just some middle-aged man trying his luck at getting a girlfriend or something. But scaring someone isn't the way to do it. Even if he meant absolutely no harm, he was too aggressive and angry. Thank you for reading. My worst travel experience was in India in the mid-90s. I was staying in an average mid-budget hotel in Goa, India. Went out for the night. Bumped into a couple of lads from Birmingham earlier in the night and went back to my hotel about midnight. Next to my hotel was a small lean-to type of food shack, for want of a better description. I called in for a last drink before bed, and I was surprised to see 2 Birmingham chaps from earlier. "What brought you here?" I asked. "Dunno. The taxi driver recommended it to us," they said. Anyway, there was only the 3 of us in there, and suddenly I was aware of another person on a table sat by himself who I hadn't seen come in. I introduced myself and asked him what his name was. "They call me the doctor," he replied. Oh crap, we've got some dodgy fantasist, I thought. "I'll go on then, indulge me. Why do they call you the doctor?" "Because I sought people out from bad trips." Me, being puzzled and looking around, couldn't see any beneficiary of his special skills, so I asked him who he was sorting. He gestured at the waiter, a Jamaican guy who had served us and seemed pretty normal and healthy to me. So I thought he was just some Walter Mitty type character, but it didn't matter to me as I was off to bed in a minute. He rolls a joint in front of me and invites me and the 2 Birmingham guys to take some. I think I've only tried one once or twice in my life, so I declined. He's quite persistent, so I think, oh, what the heck? What harm can 2 or 3 draws do to me? I take about 3 draws, along with the 2 Birmingham lads, who, by this time, are all sitting at the same table. Within 60 seconds, my brain has gone to mush, and my eyes are spinning like saucers. My last abiding memory in the restaurant is this guy looking into my eyes, wagging his index finger at me and saying, "That's why they call me the doctor." My mind's gone to crap. I don't know if I'm or the other 2 guys are being set up to be robbed or worse, and I realize I've only got seconds to act. "I'm just going for a pee," I managed to utter before staggering out of the place, my legs like Bambi on ice and stumbling into my hotel just yards away. I lay awake from midnight until 6 a.m. hallucinating. I've never taken acid before, but that's what I imagine it would be like. I never met the 2 Birmingham guys again, so I don't know what transpired after I left. So, let's not meet again, Walter Mitty. And strangely, I don't believe you're a real doctor. My family at one time volunteered at a veterans homeless shelter quarterly. It was with a group of people from our church. We had gone several times. I had a small baby that I was wearing on my body with a wrap while serving the food, and I would occasionally mingle and talk with the veterans while they ate. One evening, I was speaking to 2 men at a table, and one asked me where I lived. I didn't take it to mean anything other than the general town I was from, which I told him. It was nowhere near where this shelter was. But then, the other man at the table, who I had never seen before, looked at the other guy and told him exactly how to get to my house. He told him where I lived. Then he looked at me and he said, "I used to live on the hill across the road from you. I used to watch you all the time, you and your children." So this was the last time I volunteered anywhere like that. I reported him to the shelter director. He was a registered S offender, I found out later, and he did live across the road from us at one point. I've never been so creeped out in my life. I once met up with an old friend of mine, male, 22, a friend I had known for a few years prior to the meetup in November of 2017. I had actually met this person on a dating site. However, as time went on, the relationship between us became strictly platonic. There were no red flags. My gut did not warn me, so I completely trusted this person. We met up in town, behind a bus station on a grassy hill surrounded by trees and a tall wall. Our meeting was just to have a smoke, get a little high, and to have a small catch-up. The meetup was fine. I had actually started smoking weed a few months before, so I was still relatively new to it. He had brought something new for me to try, purple haze. I wasn't at all anxious about trying it, as I completely trusted this person and would never believe that he would lie to me. He had packed a full blunt for me, but I only managed to smoke a quarter of the blunt. We spoke during this time about work, our previous relationships, and random stuff. About a half an hour later, I started to feel extremely lightheaded and anxious. I suddenly had this strange feeling where I did not feel comfortable at all, and I really wanted to go home. When I asked him if I could go home, he offered to take me home, but I said no, it's okay. He offered again, please let me take you home. You'll be safe with me. I wouldn't hurt you. I shook my head and said no thank you. I can take myself home. When I started to walk away, I felt like I was walking on a cloud. My head became dizzy and my eyesight was a little blurry. I had never felt like this before, and in time I started to panic. When we made our way down the hill towards the bus station, I was relieved, as there were a lot of people around. So if anything happened, someone would step in. I became extremely terrified of him. I had this horrible feeling in my gut that told me to get away from him, and when I got to the bus station, I told him I would call my taxi here and go home. His tone was no longer nice, but very stern. I'm going to take you home now. And he began to pull at my jacket. I told him no, and that I was going home on my own. He pulled my jacket harder and I fell against him. He pulled me into him and told me I didn't need to be scared of him. But I was so terrified. At this point, I started to feel very paranoid and I couldn't see properly. I pushed him away from me and rubbed my eyes and called for a taxi. He tried to pull my phone from me and yelled in my face, "Do you ever listen? I'm taking you home." I noticed a few people had stopped and asked if I was okay. All I remember was that I wanted to go home. So a lady kindly called a taxi for me and waited with me, made sure I was okay and helped me into the taxi. During the time when I waited for the taxi, he kept trying to get me to come in his car with him, but the lady that had looked after me told him to go home and that she was going to take me home instead. So he left. When I got home, I gave the taxi driver money and told him to keep the change. I didn't want to wait around. I just wanted to get into my bed because at that time, it was the only place I would feel and be safe from harm. That evening, I laid in my bed for 5 hours straight, staring at the ceiling. I don't remember if I thought anything about it, or if my mom came in at that time. I just remember laying in bed doing nothing until the paranoia and the sickly feeling began to wear off. I remember looking at my phone and seeing that I had 32 missed calls from him, 10 voicemails left, and 50 plus messages. The messages were weird. He had sent around 20 messages just asking where I was and when I got home. And in one of the voicemails, he had told me how he had this fantasy of taking me home whilst drugged up and tying me up. He wanted to blindfold me, and he wanted me to submit myself to him. I freaked out and blocked him on all social media, Instagram, Snapchat, Discord, and I blocked his number. Before the blocking, I told him if he ever contacted me again, then I would call the police. I heard nothing from him for a month, until I received a text from an unknown number asking me how I was. I hadn't given my number to anyone, so I ignored it. I then received another message a few minutes later, saying that they missed me and that they would see me soon. I asked who they were. No reply. Nothing. I've spoken to some friends with regards to my story, and all of them have explained that weed would never make anyone feel this way, and a lot of them think I was given spice, not weed. spice looks a lot like weed, but the effects were a lot stronger and more dangerous. I was 23 when this happened. He was 22. A couple of months ago, while house sitting and dog sitting for my parents, I had an eerie feeling. As an obsessive ID channel watcher and younger female, I played it off as paranoia. During these few days, whenever I took the dog out, he suddenly began sniffing areas he had never sniffed before, particularly under each of our windows. And thankfully, it was because of him that I discovered 2 larger footprints under a window that looks directly into our living and dining room. Around this same time, about 2 months ago, I noticed a man walking up and down our street that I'd never seen in the entirety of my life in a small Midwestern town. He also had, in my opinion, odd mannerisms. Prolonged eye contact, continued staring and craning his neck as he walked by, and never returned my smiles, hellos, or waves. Eventually, I became irritated due to how creeped out I was with both him and the eerie feeling in general, and decided to wave, upon no acknowledgement in return, other than a cold stare. I got up and acted like I was going to follow him down the street, to which made him walk faster and turn a sudden corner. I never saw him again. Now, today, I help my parents out by picking up their dog from the groomers, as it's right up the street in a safe suburban area. Oftentimes, I don't lock while running errands in town. When I returned home with the dog, I had an unexplained, horrible feeling the minute I walked in the door. Something, maybe a blanket, seemed misplaced. Something was off. I threw a load of laundry on in the basement and quickly stood up and looked around. No one was there. Then I proceeded to check the bathroom, to check my makeup, and right then I looked down to my left and there's feces in the toilet, not flushed. I've been the only one home all morning. I immediately throw back the shower curtain and start shaking. And when nothing is there, I close the bathroom door and lock myself inside. I call the police. They arrived in less than 2 minutes, search the entire property, make me check my laptop to see if any recent search history isn't my own, and check the fridge to see if food is missing. All valuables are accounted for. I know that wasn't mine. No one in my family would have a bowel movement and not use toilet paper or flush. I know someone has been there. Yet, I love horror movies and the ID channel. They think I'm crazy. Hey dude, I now have my dad's hunting and fillet knife on me. So, let's not meet. I live in a small rural community in the eastern United States. It's a nice little town. Because of my work in the medical field, I've met some, let's say, interesting folks. I'm also familiar with law enforcement and emergency personnel. Small town life is not as dull and uneventful as people think, especially since everybody knows somebody who knows somebody. I have a lot of stories to share, but since this one just happened, I'll start here. Because it's still very recent and the investigation is ongoing, I have to be vague with some details, but I needed to tell someone. I'm single and live alone. Due to a stalker, I've moved twice, but that's another story for another time. However, it is relevant for this story for multiple reasons. The first reason being that I have a dog for the sake of protection, as well as have motion sensors and outdoor security cameras. The second reason being the location of my home, which is literally down the street from the fire department. I can see it from my living room window, and a couple blocks from the police station. However, next to the fire department is the road department, which is basically a parking lot where they park their road equipment and empty garbage trucks at night and on weekends. Oddly, it doesn't have a security camera. Small town life, I suppose. My house sits on a hill with a good view of the side of the street. Due to the incline, the large trees in the front yard, and the half cornfield in the property next to me, most people on the street below wouldn't notice me in the backyard unless they were actively looking. However, I can see the street clearly. This incident happened Saturday evening. The county was holding its annual Independence Day spiel with a community barbecue, music, fireworks, etc. I didn't attend because it's just not my thing. Plus I have a dog and the sound of fireworks could be traumatizing. Before the big show, I took the dog out to relieve herself in the backyard. There was still at least an hour of daylight, but the entire neighborhood was pretty quiet because most everyone was at the fairgrounds or various other holiday events. So when an unfamiliar large white pickup truck drove slowly down the street, I noticed. It must have turned around at the end of the street because I saw it again moving in the opposite direction, only about 20 seconds later. This time it turned into the parking lot of the road department. Now, people have been known to toss things into the empty garbage trucks, usually at night to avoid getting caught, because they don't want to or are unable to make the trip to the landfill themselves. Usually it's things like furniture or broken equipment, but I didn't see any of those things in the back of this truck. The driver was a somewhat stocky guy of average height. He took 3 large black trash bags from the bed of his truck and tossed them one by one into the hopper of the garbage truck. Then he left. Now I swear, I'm not one of those meddling rear window types who always thinks activity is suspicious and that their neighbors are up to no good. But something about this just didn't sit right with me. Normally, when I see people tossing their garbage into the trucks and leaving, I don't bother reporting it because it's relatively harmless. But this time, I had a gut feeling, so I called the police. If anything, they could get the guy for illegally dumping trash from a barbecue or whatever. While I'm on the phone with dispatch, I put my dog inside to cut down on distractions while the officers investigate. A few minutes later, an officer arrived and I crossed the street to meet him, gave him a description of the events, and pointed out which of the trucks the man had tossed the bags into. He found the bags. He took photos. He put on gloves and told me to stay back. The bags were tied in a knot at the top and took him a minute to untie one because of the gloves and how tight the knot was. But eventually he got it open, looked inside for a few seconds, then twisted it closed and took a few steps back. "Crap," he hissed under his breath. "What?" I asked. "It's a body." I felt sick. I could tell he felt sick too. I saw him grow pale. His hand was trembling when he held the radio. Even his voice was shaking as he gave the code to dispatch. The dispatcher sounded confused when she asked him to repeat it. Within 10 minutes, the county sheriff was on the scene. Even he looked sick at the contents of the bag. The coroner arrived about 10 minutes after that, and the first officer walked me back to the house along with another one who arrived at the same time as the coroner. Though I showed the first cop via the app on my phone when I described the events initially, I now showed them the video on a larger screen. The camera caught footage of the truck as it drove by both times, as well as pulling into the parking lot, though unfortunately not a clear view of the license plate or of the man tossing the bags out of the frame. We watched the footage over and over, pausing frames, the officers taking notes. Ultimately, they requested this footage as well as a copy of the files from the past week to see if the truck had been in the area before. I've also been saving footage until the road department installs their own cameras this week. Because this is still fresh, I don't know many more details. I know the body was in pieces, but I don't know the age of the victim, the gender, the cause of death, or anything like that. Information hasn't been released to the public. I don't know if the coroner has even been able to identify the body yet. A police cruiser has been parked at the fire department next door for constant surveillance, in case the guy comes back. The guy who dumped the body was likely a local. Who else would know he could dump there? He probably thought it could get buried in the other people's illegal trash accumulated over the holiday weekend, and the sanitation crew wouldn't have bothered to investigate. When I think about how this guy lives in my community, it makes me physically ill. To think that he had clearly scouted the area for a dump site, that it may not have been the first time this had happened, that this could happen again. If I hadn't called it in, if I hadn't been in the backyard that exact moment, or if I had just ignored that gut feeling, the victim would have never been found, may never find potential justice. Their loved ones may have never had closure. In fact, there's a possibility that it just might happen again to another poor soul. I just hope it's not me. Dear God, please don't let it be me. I think it's time I moved again. Third time's a charm, right? Update. Temporary housing has been acquired. I'm moving out. This happened maybe 10 years ago when I was in my early 30s. I was standing in line at the local pharmacy to get my prescriptions. This is a small town and I'm a regular there, so they know me on sight. I was behind a couple of other people in line, and there were a couple of people behind me. I kept feeling a tickle in my hair and the back of my head, but every time I looked behind me, the guy there was a few steps back and looking at the floor. This happened several times by the first time I was at the front of the line. The pharmacist told me she wanted to talk to me about my medication in the consultation room they had at the time, since converted to a bathroom. I thought this was weird because we both knew that I had been on this medication for years and would be for life. Nothing new. I get back to the room and close the door, and she comes in from the door at the other side that leads from the pharmacy. She told me that the man behind me had been stepping forward, sticking his nose in my hair and smelling, before stepping back and looking at the floor. This shook me up pretty badly, as this is such weird behavior, especially in my little town. The pharmacy staff insisted on having me wait there until the guy was distracted by another pharmacy employee, and they had a security guard walk me to my car and watch me drive off to make sure that I was gone before the hair sniffer came out and saw what I was driving and what direction I was going. I still use this pharmacy, and some of the same people still work there. I will always be grateful that they took the initiative to make sure that I was safe that day. I grew up in a small town where you wouldn't necessarily know everybody, but you are familiar with the people in town. This story happened when I was maybe 15 or 16 years old, so about 15 years ago. I was on my way to practice one Saturday morning when I noticed an older man on the corner ahead staring at me. Being me, I smile and wave at the guy as I pass. Back then, I smiled at everyone. Then, stop at that same corner waiting to cross. The guy comes right up behind me, and I vaguely remember smelling him, feeling him breathing on my neck. I'm a bit worried, but brush it off as being overreactionary. Light changes and I carry on, and this guy speeds up, walking behind me, mumbling something to get my attention. I must have looked terrified because a woman begins to walk next to me, asking if I know the guy. I tell her that I don't, and she stays in pace with me and has me go into the local grocery store that we are passing in front of with her. We get to the store, and the lady immediately grabs an employee at the register for help. At this point, I'm shaking in fear, trying to hide behind people standing by the register. They're discussing something. I'm not sure what because the guy that was following me was staring at me through the window, making a throat-slicing motion, and I'm just paralyzed. The people at the store gathered around me to make me feel safe. I'm pretty sure I broke down into tears when he did that. And soon after that, the cops came, and I watched them arrest this man. I don't remember much after that besides my parents picking me up from the store and going to the police station. My dad actually worked as a dispatcher in town at the time, and he told me a few days later that guy was off his meds and had been brought into a local psych hospital for treatment. I never saw that man or the woman who saved me after that. To my guardian angel, I never got the chance to thank you for protecting me. To that guy that wanted to slice my throat, let's not meet again. I grew up in a small town, the type where people don't really lock their doors. At least they didn't used to. When I was about 14 years old, and I'm a female by the way, I got a call to babysit from one of my regulars who had 3 daughters. It was December, so a lot of Christmas work parties were going on. I arrived and we went over to the usual rules. She mentioned the TV upstairs was out, so once I put the girls to bed, just head down there to watch TV. And so, after playing with the girls for a while, I sent them off to bed and headed downstairs. I spent a few hours channel surfing. It was about 1:30 a.m. I remember grabbing the phone, though I can't remember who I was calling. Maybe my mom or my sister to let them know that I would be really late. But I heard the door open upstairs, which sort of surprised me. The mom enjoyed the nights I babysat, as she knew that I was a night owl who could be there super late, like 3 in the morning, provided she held the cab for me. It was a small town, but I live on the other side of it. As I headed upstairs, I heard someone stumble, so I picked up my pace to make sure she was okay, only to find 3 people I had never seen before. There was a clearly drunk woman laying in the doorway and 2 guys. The guys looked as surprised to see me as I was them. I asked why they were there. The girl had slurred out that they were there for the party. I was confused and asked if they knew Helen, the mother. One of the guys looked me up and down, and I began getting even more uncomfortable at the whole situation. He asked if I was there alone. I remember not wanting to answer, because all I could think of was the fact that there were 3 little girls sleeping in the house. I decided instead of answering him, I would simply state that there was no party here and that they needed to leave. The girl was adamant that she was there for the party. The guy who had asked me the question took a step forward. I demanded this time that they leave, and we all heard the sound of a phone button being pushed. I had forgotten it was even in my hand, but it seemed to be enough to startle the guy who thought I was pushing it on purpose. The guy quickly told the other guy that they were leaving and helped the woman up. As soon as they were outside, I slammed the door and locked it, and quickly ran to the front window and watched them. They continued up the block, so it wasn't merely messing up the house numbers for them. The mom returned home 2 hours later and was confused why the door was locked. She was too drunk, so I just told her it made me feel safe. I feel stupid for not telling someone, but they didn't really do anything. I live in a small, sleepy town, mostly populated by elderly people, or people looking to raise their kids in a quiet, tight-knit area. The highest form of crime that goes on here is domestic abuse, or someone trying to rob the gas stations, which usually fails since the only gas stations in town are neighboring the police department. I have always been a paranoid kid, my mother having taught me to be afraid of the world. Now I have schizoaffective disorder. I hallucinate often, and sometimes it's hard to tell real people from hallucinations. Tonight was a night where I was 100% sure this man was real. The night began with me and my buddy deciding to hang out at around 8 p.m. We were planning on going to the local grocery store with a combined $25 to get snacks. But by the time we got in the general vicinity, we realized the store had closed 10 minutes ago at 9. So we decided to go to the gas station instead. Second best option, right? We turned, and I noticed a man who seemed to be in his 20s sitting near the courthouse with his phone and body facing towards us. Please note that me and my buddy are both unconventional looking. My buddy wearing punkish clothing, while I was wearing harem pants and a button-up. Fashion stars, I know. We both laughed it off and assumed it was some guy about to post us onto Snapchat about how ridiculous we looked. A common trend among younger people here. So we brushed it off. We walked around the courthouse to avoid the guy, in case he was going to try to confront us, and went on our way to the gas station. We ended up walking by the same side of the courtyard that he was on, and I checked to make sure he was still there. He indeed was. I made a note of it, and we went into the gas station. We both have had pictures taken of us before, and people laughing at us, so we just assumed it was another case of this. The more I thought about it though, the more unsettled I felt. Alarm bells kept going off in my head, telling me that something about this situation was not safe. We bought snacks and left, walking by the laundromat back in the direction of the courthouse, as we both lived in that direction. I saw a guy in the laundromat that looked eerily similar to the one from just 10 minutes before, but I didn't say anything. We kept walking, and right before we walked in front of the large window of the laundromat, I noticed the guy was holding his phone against the glass, right where we were about to walk in front of it. I panicked, grabbed my buddy's arm, and darted off in the opposite direction. I'm not sure what this guy's infatuation was with recording us, but I was done. I speed walked back to the gas station. Meanwhile, my buddy was telling me it wasn't a big deal and that it was fine. I told the manager of the station, and he recommended we go to the police. I'm not a fan of the police, and my buddy has a fear of them. But we had no weapons, no way of defending ourselves other than our hands, and who knows what this guy had on him. I walked to the police station next door, despite my friend protesting, and convinced him to come with me, because I didn't trust him outside on his own. Besides, the guy was now sitting outside the laundromat for some reason. After a small wait, we got our names taken, birthdays, and 2 officers came and spoke with us. We described the guy, and they mentioned they had already gotten a call involving the laundromat, and were on the way over there anyways. I described the situation and how he had been on his phone, literally against the glass on the window right as we were walking past it, and they both agreed that it was creepy, and they were glad we came to them instead of going home. We sat outside the gas station to wait so we could get some fresh air. Eventually, they went to check it out, and we were given the okay to go home. We went a very out-of-the-way direction though, just to be safe. I work at a grocery store here in town, and I hope that I never see that guy again. So this happened when I was young, maybe early 20s. I'd have to have been 5 or 6. I was born in California and had lived there for about 11 years before moving across the country. My mom and dad are separated, so I used to visit my dad every weekend. We lived in a small apartment about a 10-minute walk from a small convenience store/gas station, and literally across the street from a Barnes & Noble that my mom worked at. My dad was lonely, but also a bit insufferable, which I realized later. So occasionally there'd be a new woman over. He'd introduce us to each other and I'd go back to watching cartoons. One day, he brought home another woman, again introducing us. She said her name was Lori. I never had a second thought about her. She didn't look familiar and the name wasn't familiar either. I just continued to watch cartoons. My dad said he needed to grab cigarettes or something from the convenience store around the corner and he'd be right back. Not wanting to leave me alone, he asked Lori to watch me for a minute. As soon as he left and was out of sight, I think Lori said we should go for a walk to the bookstore, or just go for a walk. Again, I can't remember it exactly. I just remember holding her hand and walking across the street to the Barnes & Noble. We went inside, and I looked at the people at the checkout to see if my mom was there. She wasn't, but I just shrugged it off. We got to about halfway through the store when I heard a familiar voice call my name. It was my mom's friend and coworker, Lucy. We would often go to her house, and I would play video games with her 2 sons. I was immediately excited to see her and just yelled her name. She said, "Hey, come here for a minute," and I ran up and gave her a hug. At that point, she started walking me somewhere else. I think she had asked if I wanted a lollipop or something, and walked me to the employees only office in the back. I hadn't even realized that Lori had left. Lucy had said something into the radio and told me to wait into the office. I now realized that she had called security. Apparently, I was basically being kidnapped and just had no idea. I found out later in life that Lori's children were taken from her because she wasn't fit to take care of them. She also worked at that Barnes & Noble and was fired. So, my mom and Lucy knew all about how crazy she was. Lucy had called my mom and told her what happened. She immediately came to pick me up and drove me back to my dad's apartment to chew him out. I can't remember if my mom took me back with her or left me with my dad after that, but I still went to visit him every other weekend after. I don't know if Lori was found and arrested or what would have happened if Lucy hadn't been working that day, or if she never even saw me. I'm just so glad she did. So, to crazy Lori, who somehow enticed my dad and tried to kidnap me, I doubt we'll ever run into each other again. But even so, let's not meet again. This happened quite a long time ago. I think I was around 12 or 13 years old at the time. I don't remember exactly. I used to travel to the United States a lot with my family during school vacations, which is from December to February in my country. Every year we traveled to Florida and stayed a few days in Miami and a few days in Orlando. In South Miami, there is this small mall called Sunset Place. On this day at some point, I needed to go to the bathroom, and I specifically remember I went to the one on the ground floor. My mother was in another floor with my sister, and my dad was with me. He told me to go to the bathroom, and he would just wait outside right for me. I entered the bathroom, and there was no one inside it, so I just picked the last stall and sat down on the toilet. A few seconds later, someone walks in the bathroom, and the person stopped in front of my stall. I don't remember how the restroom was displayed, but I remember assuming the guy was using a urinal. A few seconds after, I hear him coming closer to my door, and when I looked forward, the guy was peeking through the gap of the door and of the structure of the stall. I didn't know what to say or do, so I just looked down and pretended I didn't see him. After that, he proceeded to enter the stall beside mine, and today, I'm pretty sure he was touching himself. I was sitting on my stall as I had no idea what to do, because even though I didn't fully understand what was happening, I was scared. A few seconds later, after he moaned loud enough for me to hear, "Ay que rico." After that, I remember talking to myself to just get out of there fast, so I pulled my shorts up and ran out of the bathroom. At the time, I didn't fully understand what was happening, or what he said, but I knew that for some reason I shouldn't stay there longer. As I got older, I started to understand what happens in the real world, and that not everyone is a good person. I realized what had really happened in there, and understood what the words he said meant. I felt really lucky, because I now know that that situation could have ended in a much worse way. Today, when I remember this situation, I get a little bit angry with my dad for staying outside and not coming in with me to the bathroom. But this was one of the few times in my life where he didn't do it. I guess this serves as a reminder for all current and future parents. Don't ever leave your child unattended, even for a second. My heart sinks a bit every time I think of this and what could have happened in there if I didn't immediately run out. P.S. In case anyone asks, the reason I could remember what he said and later look for its meaning is because I'm from South America, and although my main language is not Spanish, it is quite similar to my language, so it was very easy to remember. I took the train into the city for a concert with my friend on a Friday night. Both of us are in our mid-20s, and we were a little high on edibles. We've both taken this train many times before, and while I have had some weird experiences, as any young woman might, he's never seen anything like this. I was honestly way stumped and way spooked too. About 3 stops into our 5-stop journey, I noticed through the window of the car a guy, probably late 20s, early 30s, tall and fit, was doing pull-ups on the bar of the other car's ceiling. You know, like the bar you would hold on to so you don't fall over into someone when the train rolls to a stop. I thought he might have been younger at first, and with his friends just messing around or something. This stranger then started doing dips and other workouts on the seats, looking straight ahead. The guy was flexing and staring at himself in the train window, and at us through the glass. My friend and I at first started laughing uncontrollably about it. Edible high, remember, because we thought he was just getting a pump in and being a little weird. We were 2 stops away from our destination, and we watched him get off the train car next to us. Then things got weirder. He didn't leave the station, but instead quickly ducked into our train car. Trying not to laugh now that the stranger was literally now feet from us, we looked over to see him staring straight at us. I mean, straight at us. I had my back to the guy, but my friend said he took his coat off to reveal a tight black t-shirt, was flexing his muscles, and began doing pull-ups at the bar right next to us. He was grunting and making noises. It all seemed so creepy to us, but no one else on the car seemed to even notice him. The train stalled at the station with the doors open for longer than it routinely would, as it sometimes does if there's a delay. I turned around, and the stranger stared into me. My friend and I looked back at each other, and I had an unignorable instinct to get off the train. Without a word, we both darted out the door and onto the platform. The doors almost immediately closed, and the train swished away, leaving us alone in the station, reeling from the weird interaction. My friend was quite concerned that he may have been a threat. I admittedly was glad I hadn't been alone. We waited a few more minutes for another train to come, made it to our destination, and had a great time at the show. When we returned to the metro station hours later, edible wearing off, we were about to go through the turnstiles when we saw him. The stranger was speaking with a woman casually in the area just before the turnstiles. We freaked out and moved quickly through them, down the escalators, and ran to catch the train that was arriving as we got to the platform. We boarded the train and had a "was that really him, and is he following us" debate for 2 stops or so. From what we saw, he remained outside the station and hadn't gotten on the train with us, or even gone down the escalator. We also hadn't seen him earlier at the station when we got off to go to the concert or inside the venue. We thought we had left him in the dust when this train zoomed away. When it came time to get off at our stop and go home, my friend got up and walked towards the door, standing parallel to them while I stood by his left side, facing the back of the train car. Then, out of absolutely nowhere, the stranger came into my view and started making strides towards me. He was staring at me, in the eye, and picked up his pace towards me. I got spooked so bad that I ducked between my friend and the train door just before it opened, to try to get out of the stranger's path. I stumbled out of the train car as it opened, and we ran to the escalator. I was afraid to look back and see if he had followed us. But then, from above, we watched the stranger exit the car we had just been on together, and move to the next car over. We were so paranoid walking home from the station, and both could not reason how it was possible that he got on the same train and the same car with us both times, or why he had taken an interest in staring at only us. The route we took was not a particularly common one at all, and it was late at night. We were stumped. I remember the date and time the scariest night of my life happened to me. It was between the hours of 9 and 10 at night on Thursday, July 9th, 2020. So this was during the COVID-19 pandemic. This happened in Pittsburgh, At around 9 p.m., I started doing my laundry starting with the washing machine, which takes around 20 to 30 minutes to wash clothing. With that amount of time to spend, I decided to go outside for a walk around my neighborhood for a nightly breeze while listening to music, listening to Same Old Story by Ashes to New on repeat on my iPhone earbuds. Just to clarify, I was feeling very down because of how the world just stopped due to the pandemic. With everything closed, a protest that turned into a riot downtown that I was trapped in, and a scandal that transpired at a university I attended. But these are tales for another time. I just couldn't see my friends and girls I had crushes, and I was even going out to clubs in Pittsburgh's nightlife, especially Southside. So I was having difficulty adjusting to a worldwide event, trying to cope as well as having patience. Being such an upbeat person with a great attitude in spite of overthinking, like believing the coronavirus spread in Wuhan, China, would make it around the world to become a pandemic, then it does. This put a major emotional distress on me. I was on my way back to the house around 15 minutes before 10 when I was walking through a small highway and no lampposts. So it was really creepy going through a dark highway with nothing but trees on both sides and hearing the sounds of crickets chirping. With about a half mile to go, I was on the right side of the road when a white car coming the opposite way slows down. Then the driver's window lowers. Then a man yells at me to drop my wallet. I was surprised by why he demanded me to do. But then, as I stepped closer to the man's car, I could see that he was holding and pointing something towards me in his hand. A handheld firearm. What makes this scarier is I didn't have my wallet with me. When I found out exactly what was going on, I sprinted away back to the house, scared in the back of my mind he was going to shoot at me or take a sharp U-turn to chase me. I was wearing a white sleeveless shirt, long jeans and waterproof boots, but I ran without tripping. When I was sprinting, I also looked back every few seconds, hoping I wouldn't see the same white car, but I didn't. I made it back to the house, sweating and reflecting on what just happened to me for the first time, being someone who was never in a situation like that before. The only one else at the house was one of my second cousins, who was in a gaming room playing video games, unaware of my night walk. The others, my mother and my cousin, were out of town that night. Never in my life would I ever think I would be a victim of attempted robbery. I wish I had got the model of the car, the name of the brand, and most importantly the license plate to report him, but I was too scared to know about that in my fight or flight response. Still, I should have called the police to report this, but being that I was young and feeling down around this time and had never made a police report, I didn't. I know, very selfish of me. To this day, I wish I had just dialed 911 for this. But having an overprotective mother who was out of time that night with my cousin and my cousin's son was the only one else with me at the house, not knowing I went outside for a walk while he was playing video games. I just couldn't bring myself to confess this. They still don't know about it except a few select friends of mine I called to talk about it with. I want my mother to live until her end without having fear and the thought her youngest son had his life threatened one night. I know this was a stupid thing I did, but my mind was not well intact with my adjustment to the COVID-19 pandemic. I needed a moment to clear my mind at the moment, even at night. However, this has taught me a lesson, and this should teach you all who have never been in this situation, to never go out at night in the dark, unless you're going somewhere, but do it safely, with someone you trust, or if you're looking for time to kill during an indoor chore that takes waiting, do something that doesn't involve going outside. Either way, pandemic or no pandemic, be aware of what happens in situations like this and be safe. And learn from this if you do go out at night. Never go alone. However, I wonder what would have happened if I didn't figure out what was going on longer, or if I told him I didn't have my wallet. I believe that if I didn't know what was going on any longer, chances are I wouldn't be here. I've wanted to share this story for a few months. And being that it's currently 4:30 and I can't sleep because I still have residual fear that someone is lurking in my apartment, I thought I would hop on here and share. To set the tone, I bartend and had an awful night at work. I have thicker skin and can handle myself relatively well, but I had been harassed by a man at the bar I worked at earlier that night. After he was kicked out from the establishment, I decided to stick it out. I even called my dad and talked with him, and we agreed that so long as I was physically safe and emotionally ready to finish my shift, I should. So I did. My boyfriend waited up for me in our shared ground-level apartment, despite having worked a full day himself, because I was really upset about the comments made to me earlier in the night. To help visualize, we were laying in bed. Our bed is in the middle of the bedroom against the back wall, and we were laying with our heads where our feet normally were. The TV was no longer playing anything, but was still on the media screen. Hulu, Netflix, HBO, those types of options, but nothing playing. He had his hand on my back and had just fallen asleep. I could tell by his breathing. I was scrolling on my phone, finally allowing the discomfort of the night's earlier events to fade. Then I heard it. The faintest words, or word. Hello? I froze. I felt the milliseconds within the second expand. In a matter of moments, my eyes darted to the TV, to my boyfriend, to my phone, and I thought, or more like desperately hoped, that I had experienced some type of auditory hallucination, that I was more tired than I realized. Then I heard it again, clear as day, coming from my hallway. Hello? But it was not loud. It was low, quiet. Checking to see if I was asleep, it felt like upon reflecting. All at once, I realized I could see a figure in my hallway. All at once, I realized the voice was coming from a person who did not belong in my home. I've not forgotten the feeling. The time of the break-in was 4 o'clock. It's currently 4:44 a.m. I can count on one hand the amount of times I've fallen asleep before 4 a.m. since this incident, and/or have woken up around 3 a.m. if I do fall asleep before 4, to make sure everything is locked. Hence this post. I can't sleep. Anyways, I screamed with all of my heart. I screamed. My boyfriend jumped up, awake, confused, yelling. He threw open the bedroom door and there was an intruder, standing and staring in the darkness. We didn't know what he wanted. We honestly still don't. My boyfriend pushed him and told him to leave. It was a Saturday night. We live a 25-minute walk from the bars, which may seem far, but isn't as far as you think. We both assumed he had the wrong apartment, until he coldly and calmly said, "I'll leave," and turned around, not towards the front door, but towards the sliding glass patio door that has an enclosed patio. He slipped out, so silently, so quickly, and hopped my 4-foot fence. We decided not to call the police because I was hysterical, confused, and in the moment convinced myself all they had was the wrong apartment. It wasn't until we talked about the situation to more people that it was clear that there was something more nefarious afoot. So, to the person who broke into my apartment, let's not meet again. Please. When I was 15, I was sent all over the place. I lived at different people's houses. I was even sent out of state. I didn't go to school. I would always skip for reasons I won't share. And so typically, what I do is walk around and avoid any adult that would try to get me to do what I was supposed to do. One day around 1 p.m., I was in this random spot. It was an apartment complex type thing, and I was sitting in the gazebo smoking. I noticed a white van with tinted windows all around it. I watched as it kept circling the little spot I was at. By the 5th time it circled me, I was pretty sure I was about to have to do something. So by the 7th time, I got up and headed towards the sidewalk. As I did, I heard tires squealing down the hill. I turned around and saw the van hurling towards me at like 80 miles per hour. I just remember my knees felt like they were floating, and all I could feel was how hard my feet were hitting the pavement. I still shake when I think about it, like right now. As it got closer and closer, I knew I had a decision to make. I could keep going straight, which was a long main road and a forest beyond it, or I could turn left and walk into the hedges and see where that takes me. I looked back and forth, all my thoughts racing. How long will you be able to run on that stretch of road? He's bigger than you. He'll catch you. And my body just turned left as if I was being shoved into the hedge by something else, like some sort of entity. I felt my soul leave my body as I plunged into the hedge. Thorns scraped my skin. I felt a tug at my hoodie, and then I heard an ah, and he let go of it. I fell through the hedge and stared at him. On the other side of the hedge, there he stood, his van running and parked onto the curb. He had sunglasses on, jean shorts that were cut by scissors, white sneakers, and a trucker hat. He was clean-shaven, mustache, about 35. I watched as he kept trying to climb into the hedge, and each time he would pull back, cursing at the thorns like a jerk. There I stood with little cuts all over me. The sting of blood sat there. We stared at each other for a moment. That moment felt like eternity. I turned around and ran. Anyway, the rest of the story is, basically the cops did nothing, just like the next time it happened, which was even worse in a way. Not intending to make multiple posts, but I will answer any questions in the comments. This happened to me a year ago outside of a famous department store in Mexico while waiting for the bus. That day I went to buy a birthday cake for my best friend, among other things, so I had a lot of things to carry. I usually walk home. It's not that far, but since I had a lot to carry, I decided to wait for the bus. It was around 4 p.m., and since it was a very central part of the city, there were a lot of people walking around and waiting for the bus. So I found what happened next very strange. I was leaning against a window of the department store while carrying the bags and trying to keep my balance so the cake wouldn't slip, when a woman approached me and started talking to me. I don't know what I looked like since people always approach me to talk to me easily, even though I'm quite introverted, so it didn't seem strange to me at the time. However, one of the first things she said to me was a warning, something like, "Be very careful with your things. There are very bad people. Someone can steal from you." I took it as a kind word, but didn't pay attention. However, the woman began to ask me where I lived, what bus I took, what my parents' names were, what they did for a living, and where I went. The questions were probing. It gave me a bad feeling, so I lied to all of them, following my mother's advice regarding strangers. And then she began to tell me nonsensical things about her personal life. She had no verbal coherence. I didn't understand anything she was saying, as if she was telling random stories and connecting them in an absurd way. I noticed that there was something very weird about her when I examined her. Her face was delirious, looking almost to the sky. Her eyes opened wide when she spoke nonsense to me, and she had a disheveled appearance that I had not noticed before. I sincerely thought she had schizophrenia or something like that. And then she began to get very close to me, invading my personal space and repeating the same warning from the beginning over and over again. I began to get scared and move away from her. Even a woman saw us and also seemed surprised. At some point, the woman cornered me and got so close to my face that I felt as if I was being harassed. I forgot to mention that when I said which bus I would take, she suddenly said that she would take that one too, even though she told me that she was going somewhere different. She spontaneously made up that she was going to visit her brother, and that's why she would take the bus with me. I then told her that I would think it would be better if I walked because the bus was taking too long, but she wouldn't let me go. And when I insisted on going, she told me that she would accompany me because she was going to the same place. How come she was going to the same place? I didn't understand. In the end, already quite nervous and scared, I told her that I would walk and I said goodbye, pretending to be nice, and I simply walked to leave, and then she started following me from behind for a block. When I turned to change streets, I had to run without even caring about the cake until I lost her. I had to omit a few observations to keep it short, but I got the impression that if she didn't have any intentions of assaulting me at any opportunity, then maybe she was waiting for us to be alone somewhere so she could do something worse. Sometimes these are kidnapping tactics in Mexico, where there are more people involved. Luckily, it was the afternoon and there were a lot of people walking around, but I don't know what would have happened if I had gotten on the bus. Would she have followed me? To what extent? To do what? So, woman outside the department store. Let's not meet. Again. This happened some years ago during my sophomore year at the University of Michigan. It was during finals week, and I was down on campus studying for the multiple exams I had that day. After studying in a local coffee shop, I decided to hunker down in one of the academic buildings, Mason Hall, to use the computer lab and printers. First, however, I needed to take a detour to the bathroom. As finals had started and lectures had ended, the campus was in a liminal state. Everywhere was empty, except the bustling main study areas. Thinking I could use this to my advantage, I took the elevator to the 4th floor, mostly classrooms, to use the restroom that I thought would be the quietest. Blasting music in my earbuds, I walk in, see that it appears empty, and hop into a stall to do my business. Everything is going well as I scroll on my phone, at this point having put my earbuds away. Then I notice commotion 2 stalls to the right of my stall opening. Not odd, right? Just another student who had the same idea as me. After a weirdly long minute or so, I finally see a figure pass my stall. He walks towards the exit in this U-shaped room, only to return after what sounded like getting a view of the sink side of this room. Finishing up in my stall, I then watch this man enter the stall diagonal to me, hold the door at a 45-degree angle open and peer around at me. Now I'm sitting there, just trying to process the middle-aged man seemingly trying to peep at me. I tried to ignore him and just wait him out. He just stayed there, staring. He then began shifting around as if he was trying to adjust his view. Annoyed, I ended up saying, "Is there something I can do for you?" hoping to get him to leave. Nope. He still sits there, peering around this door. I then say, "What are you doing?" No response, just his glare. At this point, he begins shifting around the stall area, entering other random stalls and roaming the area in between both sets of stalls, the whole time looking at me through the crack of the door. At this point, my anger has turned into fear. Fear to open the stall and come face to face with whoever is brazen enough to do this. Something about his movements and unrelenting stare made me feel like I was some type of prey to him. Around this time, I begin contemplating calling someone, or calling DPSS, University of Michigan Security/Police. Thankfully enough, someone then walks into the bathroom. The creep then immediately leaves the stall he's posted up in, and leaves the room as I can hear him open and close the door. Hoping he's gone, I begin to put on my bag to then hear the door open, close, then open again as if someone had just walked in to only instantly leave. In the moment and looking back, I'm pretty sure that this was the creep coming back, yet leaving when he saw the other student at the sink. As I hear the sink turn off, I recognize this as my best chance to get the heck out of there. Walking out with the student, I don't mention the experience, and I'm just focused on getting away from that restroom. My plan was to go down 1 floor, the 3rd, and call DPSS. I figured I had to report this guy in case he tried to pull this again, and assumed the police would want to meet me at the scene. Flustered, I head down. Thankfully, there was no sign of him. Coming out the doors of the north stairwell, I plop down on the bench, take a little breather, and then begin dialing the number. Yet, before I could hit call, I see the creep walk through the same stairwell I came from. He's at a speed walking pace. Right as he sees me though, he stops outside the doorway. He then begins a far calmer and casual walk down the hall past me. As he does, he stares at me and peers into empty classrooms. As he goes down the hall, I see him round the corner to another hall on this floor. The layout is a T-shape. Spooked, I spring up and begin jogging down the stairs. As I descend, I call the police. I explain the whole situation to the dispatcher as I move swiftly down the stairs and down the hall to the main lobby of the building. Being on this first floor makes me feel far better as there is a decent crowd. I end up sitting below the staircase in the lobby next to a vending machine area. I finish my call and am told to wait for an officer to arrive. I sit there relieved, being around other people. Thoughts of the creep's intentions racing through my mind. But like clockwork, I see him again. I get a good view of him this time as I'm a bit calmer. He had a beard and wore work boots, cargo shorts, and a tucked-in t-shirt. Not a normal look for someone his age roaming a college campus. He didn't immediately spot me thanks to the crowd. As he walks down the hall from the stairs I had just ran down, he stops at the vending machine area looking around. I bow my head and watch him through my periphery in an attempt to blend in more. After about a minute of him scanning the room, he walks away. Shortly after the cop arrived, he essentially tells me that there's no way he'll be able to find this guy, but he'll take a look at the bathroom anyway. Annoyed, I take his card and leave. I end up taking a convoluted route to the undergraduate library through the grad library, my hopes being to prevent the creep from seeing me in the open diag. As I get into the undergrad library lobby, I sit down staring at the floor, fully expecting the creep to walk in again. Thankfully, he makes no appearance. I end up running into a roommate who jokes I almost got R-worded, and then sat down for my remaining few hours to try, and fail, to focus on studying.